Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the SERINUS Energy PLC investor presentation for the interim results for the 6 months ended 30th of June 2021. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply click Q&A, go to the bottom, type your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we'll notify you once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Jeffrey Orr, CEO, Andrew Fairclough, CFO, and Calvin Bratman, VP of External Relations and Strategy. Very good morning to you all.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. As we normally do, I'll make some initial comments on the period, and then I'll hand it over to Andrew. He can go through the results for the 6 months. And then at the end, I'll make some final comments, and we can answer some of the questions that we've received. The results that we published, interim results were published yesterday. The highlights operationally, obviously, on the 15th of July, we announced that our Sancrai-1 Exploration Well had discovered gas. This is, I was asked yesterday if we'd changed our mind and if it was no longer a discovery, and I want to make clear to absolutely everyone, we discovered gas. There is significant shows of gas. The drilling went very well, and we'll talk a little bit more about Sancrai on the next page and exactly where we're at and what happened, what has happened. We also, at the first portion of the year, we brought Moftino 1008 well, which is our final infill well on the Moftino field. We brought that onto production. Production for the period was down slightly to 2,000 barrels a day. The bulk of that is in Moftino, where we continue to see the field declining. We will be offsetting that decline. I've been asked many questions about whether we'll just offset the decline or whether we'll increase production again. It is likely that we'll increase production with the introduction of compression. So we will most certainly offset those declines and bump the production back up. Certainly not to the levels we saw at the when the field was brand new, but we'll bump that back up again. The compression project is 2 compression skids. The first one will go on the Moftino 1003 well, and later on in the year, the second one will go on the Moftino 1007 well. And as we've said, that will stabilize and extend our existing production. We are looking to have, we say here, the compression on the first well in August. That'll be the end of August, or possibly early September. We are having delays in fabrication because of the pandemic. There are a very limited number of people able to work in the fabrication sheds. So it is slower, and as the pandemic waxes and wanes, we see more or less people being able to work on this project. So I think the last update I had, we're about 14 days behind schedule. Artificial lift in Sabrina. Again, we're pressing ahead with that. We're on our schedule. We had broad parameters of scheduling for this project simply because we do have a partner on the Sabrina field. That partner is the government oil company, ETAP. ETAP, Tunisia have been very hard hit by the pandemic. There is not a lot of vaccine in Tunisia. ETAP at one point had 50 people out with COVID. So it's been very difficult to press things on in a timely manner. The good news is we have all approvals. We have purchase orders in. The pumps have been ordered. The pumps are being fabricated by Schlumberger. They are the long lead items. So those pumps are under fabrication. We have all the tubulars for the workover already in place. We have approvals from the government to use the snubbing unit for the workover, and that would be on the W1 well where we'll put our first pump in. So things are moving along on the artificial lift. They're slower than everyone would like. It is a partner that is a government entity. So, things like tendering, when we tender for something, we actually have to physically open the tenders in front of an ETAP auditor. And so if the office is closed, and the ETAP office is closed in Tunisia, we've literally had people hop into cars and drive over to the ETAP auditor's house so that we can open the tenders and push ahead. So we're dealing with it, but it is slower than what we would like. Now, the question that everyone wants to know is Sancrai. Sancrai is an exploration well. It was an exploration well. It was the last commitment that we had on this phase of the Satu Mare concession. The well was drilled to 1,600 meters. That was the commitment depth. The well was drilled under budget and on time. The well encountered gas over a 20-meter section. And these were very good total gas ranges. These are measured gas. This is not an inferred. So we actually were able to measure and see the gas. The porosity is about 23 to 27%. So very, very good porosity. When we went in to test the well, we tested 3 zones. In each zone, we perforated and then tried to flow the well. And in none of the zones did the gas flow on its own. And so when we have test equipment sitting on top of the well, costing about $120,000 a day, when things don't go the way you expect them to, engineers have a habit of suggesting, why don't we perforate 3 meters higher? Why don't we do something different? And that's really just guessing. And so if you're paying $120,000 a day and making guesses, that's a good way to turn a $2 million well into a $3 million well. So on Wednesday midday, we made the decision to demobilize the testing units and personnel. And we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at all the data while we have time to contemplate what's going on to try to understand why this well didn't flow. I can't say it enough times. It's a discovery. It discovered gas. We have created a new gas field. The question now is whether we or how we develop that gas field. And so, I think the market reacted very, very harshly to the news, but I think everyone needs to understand that the news is a discovered gas field. We all dreamed that we would have a well into this field and we would tie it back to Moftino and we would have gas flowing in 3 months. I tell you, I dreamt of that. But the reality is we've discovered a gas field and we're going to have to go about figuring out how we're going to develop it. And it may be that we use Sancrai-1 as a first development well when we understand it. It may be that we find that there's a better location and we drill a different well. These are all the things that we have in front of us to try to understand. And the news we learned on Wednesdays. So we are dealing with this in real time. And so that's what I'll say about Sancrai. I'm sure people will have questions at the end, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. One of the best comments that I had forwarded to me yesterday, I was told it was from one of the message boards, and I was told that someone had said, Mr. Auld better have some good answers for this call. And I felt like jumping up and saying, well, that's the whole point. We need to have good answers, and having $120,000 a day of testing equipment sitting on top of a well while we try to figure out good answers is not a sensible way to proceed. So we've taken the sensible way to proceed. This well is not abandoned, it's suspended, and we hope that we go back into it and we find a way to get the gas to flow. Financially, we had a very good period. Revenue was up $15.9 million. Net realized price of $43.83. That was on the oil side in Tunisia, $58.06 a barrel, and the gas price in Romania at $6.46. Now, we've had a very, very sharp uptick in gas prices in Europe towards the end of the period, and we see that continuing. We know that gas in Romania in September on the Bucharest Commodities Exchange has traded for around $13 an MCF. So we're seeing a very, very sharp uptick in gas prices, and that, of course, is helping the revenue. Operating netbacks of $26.72 a barrel across the business That's $28.73 a BOE in Romania and $21.85 a BOE in Tunisia. We spent $5.9 million. The bulk of that was on the drilling and completion of 1005 and the pre-drilling activities related to Sancrai. Spent a little bit on the workovers in Shwesh in Tunisia, and that gave us EBITDA of $5.5 million, which is a very good performance for the period. Cash balances, we exited June, the period at $5.7 million. At the 31st of July, we're about $5 million. So business continues to proceed financially very, very well. And operationally, we're progressing with the things that we can grow the company with. Andrew, I'll hand over to you to go through the numbers in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So as Jeffrey pointed out, revenue of just under $16 million, supported by the commodity price, combined with a lower cost of sales, that allowed us to deliver a gross profit. We moved from a gross loss to a gross profit of $2 million, which is a pleasing result in the first half. And that also then fed through to a very much reduced net loss of about $600,000. So a pleased growth shift into gross profit. Again, Jeffrey mentioned the production volumes. As we've sort of stated on many occasions, these wells naturally decline, and we are seeing that in Romania. There were some COVID-related delays in Tunisia, which slowed the implementation of workovers. But throughout the sort of first half, it was a very stable production profile, ahead of being able to put in the compression and seeing the impact of the workovers, which came through at the end of the period. Realized pricing, again, look, we've mentioned that already, but there is a notable recovery in pricing, which we are benefiting from. Production expense, as a whole, production expense was slightly up over last year. That was very much also a combination of a mining tax, a one-time mining tax that we received in Tunisia of $300,000. And also a sort of recovery of expenditure, given that last year, with the pandemic kicking in, we were very conscious of managing our cost base as we were becoming clearer about the implications. On a BOE perspective, it looks like it's ticking up, but on a quantum perspective, it is more normalized and remains a very core metric for us to focus on and maintain our internal targets. Operating netback, again, I think you can see here a strong delivery, just under $27 a barrel of oil equivalent for our operating netback, on the basis of a realized oil price of just under $44 per barrel. Capital expenditure, $5.9 million, as Jeffrey already highlighted. That is primarily, the bulk of that is in Romania, relating to the expenditure on the 1008 well and costs which we incurred ahead of spudding the Sancrai-1 well. Funds from operation, and looking at EBITDA, if I looked at EBITDA, our core metric, $5.5 million for the first half of the year. If you look at our full year for last year, 2020, we produced $6.6 million. So a very robust cash flow output for the company. Our cash flow is very much a core metric for us and a key focus for our financial performance within the business. Cash flow statement here, really it's not a lot to add. You can see some of the key movements. You can see the impact of depletion, depreciation, which was reduced, reiterating our strong cash flow performance. And you can see just again reiterating the impact of investing activities on our operating cash flow, and a closing cash position of $5.7 million at the half year. And with that, I will hand back to Jeffrey.
Good. Looking forward, I've had a lot of questions. What does Sancrai mean for the plans going forward? What happens next? The reality is our plans do not change. Sancrai was an exploration well that has succeeded in doing what exploration wells are supposed to do, is identify gas in a field. Now, we'd love that exploration well to be a development and production well. But, you know, this one we're going to have to figure out. It may become a production and a development well, or we may have another well. I think looking forward, what people have to remember is Sancrai was the first drilled prospect out of a prospect inventory, identified prospects that we have identified by legacy 2D seismic and existing 3D seismic and offset wells. It's the first of 32, I think it's 32 prospects. So there's lots more that we can do in Romania. We are reprocessing legacy 2D seismic and having that taken a look at, because we have seismic all over this field, old seismic all over this field. It's very good quality seismic, and reprocessing it gives us a very good guide to where those 30-ish prospects lie. Moftino is not done for us. Moftino is still producing. It's producing well, and the compression on that field will extend the life of that field. Those facilities were designed to be used. We have more manifolds going into the gas plant than we would ever have wells. And that was by design so that we can run other wells into it in the future. And we'd hope to be able to do that as soon as we can. Tunisia, we always talk about this 445 million barrel oil field, oil in place oil field that's got less than 1% of the oil in place produced. I mean, we think the artificial lift is the doorway to start increasing that recovery factor. So that's very, very important. It has been slower than we all wanted because of the pandemic, but we think that we will get that pump in there, and all of the estimates say that that's going to be a very, very significant effect on our production. So we'll continue also to look at the southern Tunisian assets. I think one of the things we haven't focused on enough in the past few years is the fact that underneath the Schwesh fields, there are gas prospects, and these are the same gas prospects that provide gas into the Nawara, the OMV Nawara system. So we think those are very, very interesting. We know that the Nawara system has capacity. It's nearby, so the infrastructure is there. There was really no reason to look at deeper gas prospects if there was no pipeline. And so now that Nawara is up and running and flowing gas up north, it's a good time for us to take a look at that. And so those are very, very interesting opportunities as well. And I think the message we try to give is just the scope of the scale of the assets that we have here. We have so many opportunities on these assets. You know, we show this slide on the Satu Mare concession. This is a 3,000 square kilometer concession. It is very, very large. Driving across it, everyone is always surprised when we still say, yep, no, we're still on the concession. No, we're still on the concession. All of those orange blobs are our prospects. And you can see that there's wells and seismic going across all of those prospects. So going forward, we want to focus on that and continue to focus on that. Sancrai, all that Sancrai does is proves our thesis that actually Moftino is not a standalone gas field. Moftino is not an accident. It's surrounded by all these gas fields, and Sancrai is one of them. Artificial lift, we talk about this a lot. We've had studies done. I think the real message here is on the table at the bottom, the right-hand column, the incremental production. Now, this is incremental production from putting a pump in. And if you look down there, you can see SAB W1. And that's the well that we're going to do first because it's currently shut in. So that incremental production is from zero. It's shut in because it's got a leak in the tubing. So it previously has been a producer, so we know it produces. And it's an excellent well for us to do the first pump, the first artificial lift. So going forward, that's an important one for us, and I think we've talked quite a bit about that. The pumps, we have the pumps now on order. The big development in the last couple of months is getting all the approvals from our partner and getting the pumps ordered. So that's moving forward. They are the long lead item. We are trying to use the fact that we're buying other pumps. Our Schwesch pumps we're buying from Schlumberger as well. So we're trying to use the fact that we have a multiple pump purchase program with Schlumberger to try to accelerate the long lead item. And I'm an impatient man. I'd like to get that pump in the well as soon as we possibly can. We'll do everything we can to accelerate that. But we're down now to a pump supply. All the other equipment is purchased, and the business is ready to go as soon as we have those pumps. So summary. This was a good, strong financial performance. And that's really the bottom line. What we judge ourselves on and what we judge the company on is the financial performance. $15.9 million of revenue, $5.5 million of EBITDA. Production is stable, but it is declining in Romania. We've never tried to hide that, or I hope people aren't surprised that gas fields decline. But we do have means of extending that production in that field to extract more gas. That will create value for us for some time into the future. Sancrai-1, well discovery. It discovered a gas field. Now we need to figure out how to produce it, make it commercial. The reprocessing of the 2D seismic lines, that may well help us define a little bit more about Sancrai, but primarily that's looking at Madarash and where we go next. Farther out into the future, we have Madarash, which is to the east of Sancrai, and then to the northeast of that, we have Nipaseni, and that's sort of the order that we're going to step out from Moftino. And we talked about the artificial lift program. So all in all, a very good quarter. Strong financial performance. We're all very thankful that commodity prices are where they are, and that makes the company comfortably financial. And that, I think, brings us to the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeffrey, Andrew, and Calvin, for the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you the recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Perhaps before we go on to some of the live Q&A, Jeffrey, Andrew, Calvin, we had a number of pre-submitted questions, and perhaps I can start, if I may, just reading the first one out here. It reads as follows. As of the 31st of March, the company owed $14.2 million to trade creditors and accruals, of which $6 million related to historic work in Brunei. Has the remaining $8.2 million been settled?
Andrew, do you want to answer that one?
Yep. Well, as at 30th of June, as you'll see by the accounts, accounts payable stood at $14.7 million. So no is the answer to that. It's slightly increased because of the additional costs coming through on the Sancrai sort of pre-spudding expenditure. Although we've been looking at, given the inflows and the cash generation of the business, we've been sort of using this opportunity to certainly pay down within Tunisia some of the more historic payables. So that's a work in progress, but no, the answer is at 30th of June, payables stood at $14.7 million.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. The next question reads as follows. Is the company considering building a new plant for Sancrai? If so, how will it be funded and what are the timeframes?
Yeah, of course, one of the possibilities of any new gas field is to put a plant on top of the field. What I said earlier is that Moftino was built with capacity, more manifolds into the plant than we were ever imagining having wells in Moftino. And that was done so that any discoveries could be routed up to Moftino and we could use capacity that we had in Moftino. Now, that's the short-term solution, is to route things to Moftino. Sancrai, actually, the shortest distance from Sancrai to a trunk line to the Transgas network is straight up through the fiscal skids at Moftino. So even if we built a gas plant in Sancrai, we would still have to have a line up to Moftino, up to the fiscal skids to get it into the distribution system. So in the immediate term, the idea was to try to get early production and run that early production up into Muftino. So using the spare manifolds, run it through the Muftino plant. In the longer term, the idea was that there would need to be another gas plant simply because of capacity. But the company really hasn't decided whether that gas plant goes on top of Sancrai, goes on Madarash, goes between Sancrai and Madarash. I think that's a couple of years into the future. So in the immediate term, no, we don't have any plans to build a gas plant on Sancrai. In the longer term, yes. I've always said 4 or 5 gas plants scattered around this concession is what we're aiming for. So in the longer term, yeah, we'd like to have more gas plants simply because we need the capacity.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Next question we've got here is, in the last 4 years, the company's been taken to a debt-free position, low-cost, low-risk producer, and increasing the BOE. When do you believe the shareholders start to see that reflected in the share price? And what are SENX doing to generate interest from new investors?
The biggest frustration. I think as I look back, I joined a business, I stepped into a business that had a $38 million working capital deficit. It was unlikely that it was going to be able to finance its debt in the near future. And it had a cornfield in Romania. And we've managed to pay off our debt. We've managed to reduce the cost of this business from some very, very high costs to now what is a low-cost producer. We've managed to create a project in Romania that has more projects to come behind it. Muftino will not be the only gas field that we have in Romania. And we've managed to figure out what to do with our Tunisian assets to increase the production there. All of these things have been done. All of these things add value. So yeah, I'm very, very frustrated that investors don't see that value like we see that value. And our management and our board all see that value. What do we do? Well, we do things like this. We go to as many events as we can. We try to talk to people. The best thing that we can do is explain the story as frankly and as openly as possible so that people understand what our objectives are and what this business has. People ask me a lot why I joined a company that had a $38 million working capital deficit, couldn't pay its debt. I did that because I could see that these assets had so much potential in them. Now, they're not going to be attractive to Exxon. They're too small. But for us, we can really grow with these assets. The capital allocation, their low capital footprint. So all of these things are very, very attractive. And yes, we do as much as we can. And we are frustrated that that value doesn't seem to come through. We will continue to market as best we can. We'll continue to try to educate our investors. I think educating our investors is very important. We saw what happened yesterday. I don't think that that is a reasonable reaction to an exploration well that discovered gas and is suspended for further technical work. I think that's an unreasonable reaction. And that means we have to educate people to why that's an unreasonable reaction. And we'll try to do that on calls like this. We'll try to do that when people call us. So we're very, very actively trying to make sure the story is understood. Make sure the story is simple. It's a cash flow business. That is really all it is. And make sure that people value that story. But yeah, it's very frustrating.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Next one we've got here is, in an update provided December 2020, you were quoted as saying that we can be an 8,000 barrel per day company within 18 months. Are we still on track for hitting that target? And when do you visualize hitting those milestones?
Yeah, what I was referring to is, if I flip back in the presentation, the really big transformation is, there's two things that can transform this business very quickly. Discoveries in Romania that we can get into production in the gas plant. They can transform the production profile very quickly. And our artificial lift program. And on this slide, you see that incremental production You can see how meaningful that can be. Are we on track for that? Well, I think Sancrai is not going to produce this month. It's not going to produce next month. So the dreams of sort of discovering the field and having it immediately into production, I think the reality is we're going to have to study that field a little bit more. And I did refer to delays that we're having in Tunisia. Now, these aren't huge delays. They're not beyond what we've put out in our corporate presentation when we lay out our timelines for the artificial lift. So, 18 months, I think that's aggressive. We'll still target it, but very, 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 very real, the fact that that kind of production increase is out there. Whether it's 18 months or 2 years, I'm not trying to adjust a production profile because, as everyone knows, we do not give production forecasts. We do not give guidance on production. We never have. But we do say what the projects are and what they can deliver. And very clearly, these projects can deliver that kind of growth. So we are aggressively pursuing them and getting them done as quickly as possible. I didn't anticipate a pandemic, so unfortunately, that has slowed us down in a number of different ways. Not just in Tunisia, it slows a lot of things down, and I think that will continue.
Thank you. Next question, I think you've actually touched on, Jeffrey, but just in case there's anything further to add, what is the progress on compression at Moftinu, and how will this affect BOE per day? Will we see a moderate increase or just stability?
Yeah, I hope for a moderate increase. At a minimum, we stabilize declines. We have definitely modeled, reserve engineers have modeled that there would be an increase. But until we get those compressors out there, remember, there's not a lot of shallow gas compression in Romania. So I'm not sure if we're the first, but we're very, very early mover in shallow gas in Romania. So typically you would see an increase in production. We're hopeful for that, but at a minimum we stabilize the declines.
Thank you. Has anything materially changed to the CapEx plan since the last presentation?
Well, I think we had CapEx allocated for an immediate success case in Sancrai, where we would build a flow line up to Moftinu right away. So that has been deferred. We won't be building that until we understand how we can flow Sancrai. But in terms of the actual projects that are out there, that obviously the timing of Sancrai development is deferred. Everything else we're trying to accelerate as quickly as we can. So if we could accelerate the pumps, we would do that. If we could move the compression, we could do that. These things are into fabrication, so there's not a lot we can do. So the answer is, with the exception of a Sancrai flow line, no, nothing. Our capital plans have not changed.
Thank you. Again, one you have covered off, but just in case there's anything further to add, is how has the political instability affected operations and plans for CapEx in Tunisia?
When the president dismissed the prime minister, I think a lot of external news sources were quite surprised. Internally, this has been going on for a long time. There's been conflict between the prime minister, the president of the Senate, and the president of the Republic. So I think it has been viewed as favorable within the country. It is disruption, and no business likes disruption. So we are very, very conscious of it. We have not had any effects in our fields. If you had to say political disruption and the pandemic, the pandemic has disrupted far, far more than this political disruption has. However, we do have to be careful, and we do have to be watchful, because events like this can move very, very quickly. So we have stocked up the fields again, so that if we do have to sort of seal the fields, we're able to do that. We're more careful when we time our truckings, so that we don't inflame anything by trucking oil trucks through a village in the middle of the night. We are more sensitive when these political events happen. But so far, it's been stable. There's been the disruption at the political level, but it doesn't seem to be coming into society, so to speak. So I would hope that would continue. The president has, I think it's another week until he has to appoint a new prime minister. So we'll see what happens then. But so far it's been relatively stable.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Are SENX looking at potential acquisitions rather than organic growth to grow the business?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. I was going to say that's a short and sweet answer, but that's perfect.
I'm not gonna comment too much. You know, I remember when Kurdistan was the big area for everyone, and one of the companies came out and said, "Oh, we're interested in buying everything in Kurdistan," immediately increasing the price for everything in Kurdistan for themselves. So these are commercially sensitive. We want good deals, so I'll just answer yes.
That's a perfect answer. Thank you so much. Penultimate pre-submitted question here we've got, and I guess you can't really touch on this, but what does the Sancrai discovery mean to SENX in terms of value and future opportunities? I know you've covered a lot of that off, but if there's anything further to add there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the whole gist, the whole frustration with the share performance yesterday is the Sancrai-1 well discovered gas. Whatever that did, even if we don't produce that gas, even if we can't produce that gas, which I think we can, but even if we don't, what it's done is it's validated those other 30 prospects. Muftino is not just a standalone gas field. And so we've stepped out, we've found another gas field, we'll study this one, we'll learn this one. But what it does do is it shows that, so I think it is a very, very important well. I very much look forward to producing it.
Fantastic. The final pre-submitted question is, what is the ultimate goal with SENX? With your history, is it safe to assume you'll maximize output and then look for a buyer?
No, I mean, that's not a good way to add value. What is our objective? Our objective is to grow the business and keep our costs under control so that we're effectively growing the cash flow as much as possible. If we do that and we do it well, then yes, people will look at it and say, "Oh, that's a nice business. I might like to buy that." But I don't think I've never set out to sell a business. You know, oh, we're going to sell this. I've set out to build the business to be so good that someone wants to come and buy it. And so that's what we're trying to do. The first thing you do is you get your costs under control. You manage the business tightly. You make sure your decision making is effective. You put the right people in the right jobs, because the right person in the right job really does change how the company performs. And then you grow the business, but you keep that template intact. So once you've got your foundation built, once you've got your costs under control, once you've got all the organization working properly, then you grow it. And yes, eventually someone will come along and value your business more. To be really theoretical, they'll value the net present value of your cash flow stream higher than you do. And they will make a proposal. So everything's for sale. I was once very embarrassingly quoted in a newspaper as saying that my grandmother was for sale. Everything's for sale. It's a price. We just want to make sure that if someone does want to buy it, they pay the highest price possible.
That's fantastic. That concludes the pre-submitted questions. Obviously, you've had a number of questions submitted during the session itself today. Perhaps if I may just to hand back to you and just click on that Q&A tab, guys, and where appropriate, if you could just read out the question and give your response, that would be fantastic.
Okay, I will start here. When do we expect the W1 well to have the pump installed and to be producing? In our corporate presentation, we have the timelines for all the pumps, and we would hope to have that well, the workover conducted tail end of this year. It really depends on how quickly we can get the pump and accelerate the long lead item of the pump. So it's a hard one to answer right now when pumps are being delayed by the pandemic. But I think tail end of this year, start of next year, exactly what we have in our corporate presentation for the timing. Where do I see the share price in 6 months? Well, I'm stunned to see the share price where it is now. I think that the research analysts that cover this business have got their models working very well and got their pricing working very well. They both have a price of around 6p, and I think that is a reasonable value for this business. And yes, I'd like to see that price there tomorrow. I wouldn't want to have to wait 6 months. But you know, the market is a fickle beast. We need to convince, you know, we need to make people understand the story, and we're working hard to do that. Can I give an indication on how long you expect Moftino to be commercially productive? And on Sancrai, are we able to give any timescales on next steps? Moftino, we've always said Moftino is a 5 or 6 year field life. On page 16 of the reserve report that's on our website, that's what it shows, and that's what we believe to be the case. It hasn't deviated from expectations very much. Sancrai, able to give any timescales on next steps? Unfortunately, no. We made the decision to suspend the well on Wednesday. It was terrible timing for us. I don't like to have our financial results, which were very, very good, confused with operational results. But on the rules of AIM, the words "without delay" are very, very important to us. We put out that release without delay, so the news was in the market yesterday. We had results yesterday, which we were focused on. The teams in Romania are working on all of the options we may have available to us. People are putting their heads together and trying to figure out what options we may have available to us, and we'll sit down and look at those options. So unfortunately, the news is very, very fresh, and we're going to have to take some time to figure out what options are available to us, and each of those options will have its own timescale, and we will then select the path that we will take. That is the next steps. So simple as that. Please, can you advise the current forecast delivery date for the Schlumberger pumps? I understand the typical lead time for pumps is approximately 30 weeks, extended to 52 weeks due to the pandemic. No, we're not taking 52 weeks, that's for sure. 30 weeks, what are we at? That I think is probably high as well. I don't have a forecast from Schlumberger because, as I said, we're trying to work with them to sort of accelerate things, given that we're a multiple pump buyer. So to be honest, the 30 weeks is longer than what we have in our schedules, and the 52 weeks is definitely well outside any expectations we have. But I can't be any more precise than that while we work to try to reduce those lead times. While Sancrai technical studies are of course ongoing, can you give any color on the range of possibilities that might be available to get the well flowing? For example, fracking, subject to current evaluation work, any sense of the potential timescales for completions of the current technical studies? I think I spoke about sort of the timescales. We're in the position right now of understanding what the options are. The options range from perforating differently, maybe bigger perf guns, perforating different zones, all the way up to fracking. But I would warn that of the stimulation techniques, fracking is at the far end, would require special permission in Romania, like in any European country. And we would hope not to have to go to those sort of higher end stimulation problems. To be honest, if it ended up being in a situation where fracking was required, this is a vertical well. We may well look at different solutions if we got permission to frack, and if that's where we went. But I think right now that is the two standard deviations out in terms of stimulation work. How much time do you need to study Sancrai-1? Well, it's probably months, not weeks. We need to do all the petrophysics all over again. We need to take all the information we've got from this well. We need to compare it with some of the work we're doing on the 2D seismic. We need to compare it to our old 3D seismic. We really do need to figure out if this well is in the right place, or if there's a better well, or if there's a stimulation technique we can use. So it's not weeks. Imagine that Sancrai is a failure. What's the strategy for the future? Well, Sancrai is not a failure, right? It discovered gas, and that is possibly the most important thing that an exploration well can do. The fact that it may or may not be the development well we use, or that we may find a different way to develop the field, really is not the point here. The point is an exploration well discovered a gas field, and now we've got to figure out how to make that gas produce. So I don't imagine that Sancrai is a failure because it is a success. It's an exploration well that found gas. And look, we're not grasping at straws with sort of this, a technical success, but a commercial failure. We don't know that yet. We know that technically this has found gas, and we'll figure it out. And that's the steps that we have to take ahead of us.
That's fantastic, Jeffrey, Andrew, Calvin. You've covered off every single question we ever had pre-submitted or during the event, so thank you very much. Jeffrey, perhaps I could just ask you just to wrap up before we redirect investors to give you a little bit of feedback, please.
Yeah, look, it's terribly bad timing to put out a good set of financial results and put a well result out that suspends an exploration well. But I think we need to focus on what this company is at its core, and that's shown by the financial results. This is a cash generating business that's robust at low oil prices because of its cost structure. So, I focus on the financial results. On the technical side, Sancrai couldn't have come at a worse time. We have to put out a press release on the same day as our good results. But Sancrai shouldn't be read as a failure. Sancrai is a success. It discovered a gas field. It validates a thesis. It validates the geological model. It changes the fact that now we have 2 fields and we have multiple other fields. So, the summary I would say is the core of the company is shown by the strong financial results. The growth of the company is shown because Sancrai we can have other fields out there. So in summary, I would say the business is strong and it's doing well. And I'm disappointed that the shareholders don't value that more. But we will keep pushing on.
That's fantastic. Jeffrey, Andrew, Calvin, thank you very much indeed for updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close the session, as you will be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback so the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of SERINUS Energy PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you very much and good morning.